Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Brian Ford. I'm the head of Treasury Management for Regions Bank, and we're proud to have our clients and our friends join us today for this very important discussion. We've got many members of Regions Commercial Banking and our private wealth management teams here today, as well as leaders of our Treasury Management group. And we're very pleased to have Leslie Carter-Prawl, our head of private wealth management, here as well. We'll hear from Leslie later in the program. And although I can't be there in person, I'm joining virtually today because this is such a critically important discussion for everyone. We're here today because we all face a common threat, and we all have a role in serving to combat that threat. According to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Report, a record number of $16.6 billion of losses were reported last year. That's such an alarming amount. And it's likely that you or you know someone that has been impacted by that, perhaps a family member or your own business. In fact, I wonder how many of us have received a suspicious text or phone call or email just in the last week. And recognizing the warning signs is the difference between becoming a victim and avoiding becoming a victim. So throughout today's discussion, you will be hearing about ways to recognize those warning signals. And perhaps more importantly, you'll be receiving practical advice and guidance on how you, your colleagues, your family members, and others can stop fraudsters in their tracks. As a bank, we've got terrific systems and sophisticated products and solutions that can help clients recognize fraud. We give our business clients access to many different tools, the latest fraud mitigation solutions through our Treasury Management division. Consumers and wealth clients also have access to tools and resources to protect their accounts. We also partner with law enforcement to help share critical information. But we found that the best system is when your bank, your credit card company, your investment firm is not only looking out for you, but the best system is when you join us in taking an active role in recognizing suspicious behavior to keep your accounts secure. We've got a very good economy. People and businesses are thriving. Staying ahead of fraud is what can help keep our economy moving forward. Regions is extremely proud to work with our businesses and our individual wealth clients to help serve their needs. Our success is a testament not only to the growth of our service area, but also the ways that we work with our clients to help them protect and ultimately grow their finances. So when it comes to protecting and preventing fraud, as I mentioned earlier, we believe very strongly that the best offense is the best defense. So we take the next step by welcoming Heather Hughes to share her insights on fraud prevention and cybersecurity. Heather formerly served as the vice president of Stroh's Friedberg's Houston office, where she led a wide variety of engagements, including data breach and incident response matters, complex digital forensics investigations, security risk assessments, and cyber due diligence investigations. Heather's definitely someone you want on your side. Her experience is vast, and I appreciate her being here to share her personal perspectives on the landscape of fraud and what we can do to help stay ahead of that. And we're also joined on stage by Jeff Taylor. Jeff is the head of commercial fraud forensics at Regions Bank. He leads our efforts to work with our business clients and their employees on fraud prevention. He keeps his finger on the pulse of the latest trends, and he delivers consultation and guidance in ways that are helping our companies shore up their defenses and prevent them from falling victim to scams. Jeff is also someone you definitely want on your side. So we've got a lot to cover today, and I want us to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and Heather now to begin today's discussion. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you, Brian, and it's an honor to share the stage with you again, Heather. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for the opportunity to have this conversation. As Brian said, it's extremely important. Fraud is definitely not going away. It impacts us in so many different ways and has such a dramatic impact on all of our families, our businesses, nonprofit organizations. Everyone is a potential target for fraud and these scams. As Brian mentioned, I'm confident that if I were to ask for you to raise your hands, that at least 7 out of 10 of you, 70% of you would say, yes, I know someone, I have been a victim myself, or my organization has been a victim of fraud. According to the Federal Trade Commission, that percentage aligns with what we would see here. 73% of folks have said and reported that they are a victim. So we're going to go through a number of different things today. We're going to talk about a number of different subjects. We'll talk about at a high level some information from a survey that was administered by the Association for Financial Professionals to give you some scope of the problem. We'll talk a little bit about the 3 most impactful fraud attack vectors that we see today. We'll provide you with some resources, and then we'll save some time at the end for questions. So if you don't mind, hold your questions to the end. You can actually text those questions during the process. If you'll text the word regions, REGIONS, to 22333, you can text then, you log in, and then can text your question and Dana will monitor those questions, and we'll talk about those at the end. So I am obligated to read this disclaimer just to make sure that satisfy my compliance partners in the room. The opinions expressed in the presentation are statements of the speaker's opinion, are intended only for informational purposes, and are not formal opinions of nor binding on Regions Bank, its parent company, Regions Financial Corporation, and their subsidiaries, and any representation to the contrary is expressly disclaimed. As I said, we'll talk about these few things. And I mentioned the texting regions to 22333, and you'll probably see this as we're going through the presentation, just as a reminder of how to go about doing that. So this Payments Fraud and Control Survey I mentioned earlier was administered by the Association for Financial Professionals. And you'll see there, 79% of the companies that responded to this survey indicated that their company had been a victim of fraud. So a little higher than what the Federal Trade Commission number said, but 79% of the companies responding. Checks are the #1 payment channel that are reported most often as being a payment channel of risk for fraud. Also, if you see, there's a little bit of an increase in wire from 2023 to 2024. And then the numbers around ACH debits and credits that you can see there. As Brian mentioned earlier, though, in the bottom left-hand corner, just to give you a scope of the issue, and Heather, weigh in on this too, the numbers of complaints that were reported to IC3.gov. And remember that, because IC3.gov is the Internet Crime and Complaint Center. It's the central reporting agency for Internet crime. So when you become a victim of an Internet crime, one of the first things you want to do is report that crime to IC3.gov. It's a joint venture, it used to be a joint venture between Homeland Security, the Secret Service, and the FBI, but now it's primarily managed by the FBI. But that's your introduction into federal law enforcement. So if you look at those numbers, the actual number of complaints went down between 2023 and 2024. But look at the dollars. And Heather, we laugh about this because we know that these numbers are underreported, and the FBI even agrees with that, right? I mean,
yeah, so I'm in the business of doing instant response. So companies call me when they've been hit with some sort of either email compromise or ransomware, and so then we do the forensic investigation. We're negotiating with the terrorists who've gotten into their systems, and probably half of my clients don't ever report it. So, for every big Colonial Pipeline that you hear about, there are 1,000 other companies that week that were hit by ransomware that never hit the news. So, just this year, it's September, I've personally worked 300 ransomwares. There are 50 other companies that do what I do. So, I mean, if you do the math and then you look at those numbers, you can see that a lot of them aren't reported. And our clients, they don't want to report it because they don't want the feds, in their business. Now, if you have cyber insurance and you want to get that ransom payment paid by your cyber carrier, you have to report it to IC3, but it's way underreported, I would say by more than 50%.
Yep. Yeah, my contacts at the FBI indicated anywhere from 2 to 3 times more than what is actually being reported here. And as Heather said, people are embarrassed to report. They may not feel like the federal law enforcement's going to help them when they do that reporting, or they don't know to report. And that's why whenever we have these kind of conversations with clients, we want to make sure that we emphasize that you need to report that internet crime to ic3.gov. So the first thing we're going to look at is check fraud. Check fraud, as I said, is the number one fraud attack vector that is that reported by the companies that responded to the Association for Financial Professionals survey. And check fraud can occur in a number of different ways. The first one is alterations of the check itself. So a fraudster may have intercepted that check in the mail. They may then take that check and what's called washing or cleansing that check to be able to remove the payee name or alter the amount of the check. They'll typically leave the signature on that item, but they will use actually readily available chemicals to be able to wash the ink off of that check and then be able to alter that check and negotiate it. So they're changing that payee name, they're changing the dollar amount. The second one is the creation of counterfeit checks. So once they have that check, they are able then to use the routing and transit and account number that's at the bottom of that check to go and purchase blank check stock, and they can use that routing and transit and account information to create a counterfeit check and then negotiate that counterfeit check in a way too. And then of course forgery, where they just literally forge the signature on the back of the check and deposit it into an account that they control. And so the question's always, well, how does this happen? How do the fraudsters get their hands on these? And believe it or not, you may have seen these in the news, the fraudsters are literally robbing the U.S. Postal Service workers, the guy, the lady that is delivering mail in your neighborhood. They're literally hijacking their truck and taking that truck to an area, a remote area. They're pulling all of the bins of mail out of the back of that truck. They're taking it to an apartment or a hotel room that they've rented, and they're going through that mail and they're looking for bank statements, credit card mailers, checks that are being mailed, anything that they believe that they can either leverage for fraud or monetize on the dark web. So they're selling these. In a lot of cases, they will not leverage the item themselves, but they'll sell it on the dark web, on WhatsApp or Telegram, one of these channels, encrypted channels that the fraudsters are using to communicate. And so once they have their hands on that information, used to in the old days, what we would go out in the afternoon in our neighborhood, we might put our bills in the mailbox and pull that little red flag. Well, guess what? That's a red flag to the fraudsters as they're driving around through the neighborhood. They know that there's something in that mailbox. And so they will then, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, when we're not paying attention, they're going to pull that information out of the mail and likely try to leverage those items. Oftentimes I'm asked, how are they able to deposit these items? Well, what the fraudster will do is they will take a check that may be written to Jeff Taylor Toyota. They'll open an account somewhere at another financial institution with paperwork that's fictitious paperwork, but it'll be in the name of an LLC. So they'll say Jeff Taylor Toyota LLC. And if they're ever questioned about it, well, it's just a division, it's just another part of the company that we're opening here in this particular market, because they're never going to do it in the same market where that company is located. They're going to do it in a different market. And so they open that, they're able to obtain that LLC documentation, they're able to open that account, and then all they do is just write LLC in the payee line and then deposit that check that they've stolen. So it's really not that difficult for them to do that and then obtain those funds that were legitimately intended for Jeff Taylor Toyota. So some suggested practices that I'll cover for check fraud. We just encourage you to reconcile your accounts quickly. Reconcile them regularly. Look at what items are posting to your account on a regular basis. If you can reconcile on a daily basis, then obviously reconciling real time is the best thing to do. But if you can reconcile daily, that's a good practice to put in place. Anytime that you can convert a paper payment over to a digital payment channel, to ACH, to wire, to even real-time payments, leveraging those platforms or those payment channels provides you with some additional protection that you would not see when you write that as a check. And then from a consumer standpoint, leverage your bill payment platform. Make sure that you are using that bill payment platform and allowing then the bank to determine how that payment is being made, because your bill payment provider typically has relationships with the people that are accepting those payments, and they're able then to create digital payments to give them credit. You want to make sure that you're storing and securing any of your blank check stock. Make sure that you put stop payments on any payment or any item that you realize, any check that you realize is lost or stolen. And then leverage the protection products that your financial institution provides for you, like positive pay for checks and ACH positive pay that helps protect you from a debit standpoint. But also, when you have positive pay, make sure that you include payee name verification on that product, because again, as I said earlier, what the fraudster will do is alter that payee name. So if you have payee name verification, you're able then to see what that payee name was intended to be and then what it might have been altered into. So make sure that you're doing that. The next one that we're going to cover is ransomware. And Heather, we talked about the numbers, and the work that you're doing, 300 cases that you worked just this year. Walk us through these slides on ransomware and give us your perspective on what you're seeing.
Okay. So typically, what happens is an employee will get an email. It almost always comes from employee failure, unfortunately. So you can have, the best firewalls, you can have the best data security systems. But if you have an employee who opens an email, clicks on a link, opens an attachment, you're letting the threat actors into your system. The threat actors know this. A lot of times they're using your business partners or your vendors. So think about like your accounts receivable, accounts payable team. They probably have relationships with your vendors because they're emailing them constantly with invoices and questions. They establish relationships. So if one of those vendors gets hit by a threat actor, the threat actor will use that leverage to then send emails, and if you check the email address, it looks like it really is coming from your business partner or your vendor, because it really is. And it'll say, hey, there's, this invoice doesn't look right. Will you please look at this? You open up the invoice. You don't know that it's deployed malware. It's not like the movies, a skull and crossbones does not pop up on your screen. The threat actor wants to be in your system for as long as possible. So they want to move laterally through your system. They want to access as much sensitive information and exfiltrate as much information as possible, because they'll use that as leverage in the ransom demand. Their goal is to encrypt your systems and your backups, but more and more companies, especially over the past 3 or 4 years, have immutable backups, meaning that they've backed up their entire system on a completely different server, different location. So if a threat actor gets in the system, they can never get to those backups. So they encrypt all your systems. That's kind of a pain in the neck, but you can rebuild from your backups. If they encrypt those backups, you're going to pay the ransom because otherwise your business is out. What they've done recently is they will exfiltrate really sensitive information, and if they know that they can't encrypt your systems, then your ransom demand may say something like, we've exfiltrated a terabyte of sensitive information. So for my healthcare clients, that could be medical information. I had a manufacturing client, it was all their intellectual property, their customer pricing lists. Think about all of the sensitive information you have on customers, whether it's financial, personal, medical, and they'll threaten to publish it if you don't pay the ransom. So the secondary ransoms happen a lot. And the cyber carriers are, if you want cyber insurance, you do have to prove that you have some good controls in place to make sure that you're trying to keep those threat actors out. But the threat actors, most of them are coming from, China, Russia, North Korea. They're not here. I often get asked, why don't we arrest them? Well, they're in other countries and they move around constantly. We're pretty familiar with the different ransomware gangs. They have names. There's Scattered Spider is one that's a particularly bad actor right now, but they have different names and we know how they behave. So we know, okay, well, if it's this threat actor group, we can negotiate the ransom down by about 50%, or this threat actor group always exfiltrates information. This threat actor group, their main goal is to encrypt as much as they can encrypt. So, we've learned a lot over the past 8 or 9 years as this has become an epidemic, but it's still happening. It's happening a lot, and it's almost always because of the employees.
So one of the goals is disruption?
Yeah, well, it's disruption, and, people often ask me, and I think we actually get to this about to pay or not to pay the ransom.
Right.
It's a business decision. And the threat actors know that even if they just encrypt your email, imagine if you go back to your office today and nobody can email. That means you don't have your contacts, you probably don't have your calendar, you can't contact your clients, your vendors. If your email is down for 4 days, what does that cost your business? So I live in Houston, Texas, it's energy. I had one of my energy clients that was a refinery, and the systems were shut down and they were losing $1 million a day. So if the ransom demand is $3 million and they're losing $1 million a day, that's really a no-brainer. They're going to say, yeah, pay the ransom. Like, we hate that we're paying terrorists, but we're going to lose $10 million in the time that it takes us to rebuild our systems. Not to mention we're going to lose all these customers who are going to find someone else in the meantime and may not come back to us because they knew that we were hit with a cyber attack, and so they may not trust us with their information anymore.
So federal law enforcement does not encourage the payment of a ransom,
That's
right?
correct.
So,
yeah.
So what's the answer? Because you think about, I'm either going to pay the ransom, they're going to probably publish my information on the dark web anyway.
Right. So federal law enforcement does not encourage it, but they also understand that sometimes it's a business decision and you may not have a choice. There is some honor among the thieves where if you pay the ransom, so like what we would do is we would do a proof of life and make sure that the decryptor actually opens files before any ransom was paid. And then, but if you're paying for them not to publish information, then you do some trust and verification where then you probably want to do some deep and dark web scanning. Not yourselves. Nobody in this room should ever go on the deep or dark web. It's a terrible place. Please don't go there. To Jeff's point, if you want to buy people, drugs, or guns, you go to the dark web. And that's where all fraudulent information is traded. It's where almost all human trafficking happens. It's where all of the gun trade, and it's where all of these threat actors are on the dark web as well. If something happens, so if you are the one that gets the pop-up on your computer that says, we've encrypted your systems, they almost always identify themselves. They're very proud of themselves. They will tell you, we're Scattered Spider, we're AB1, whatever they are. Sometimes we figure it out because of their IP address or their Bitcoin wallet. Never ever negotiate, never respond to them. you want professionals, so you want to call your outside counsel, you want to call a forensic team, and your outside counsel that typically is doing like your contract negotiation is not the outside counsel. You want a forensic breach coach. If you have cyber insurance, they will have a list of people. They'll have a list of law firms, a list of forensic responders, even PR and media crisis communicators as well are all approved by your cyber insurance. But you want someone who knows what they're doing to talk to the threat actors, because the ransom negotiation team will pretend that they're you. They will pretend that they work for your company, and the first communication is usually, we don't have that. We don't have access to those kinds of funds. We need 3 or 4 days. We need board approval, because this stuff never happens during business hours. It happens at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, or Saturday morning on a holiday weekend, where you don't have access to your C-suite. IT may not be monitoring things, so you want to make sure that the professionals are negotiating. And like I said, depending on the threat actor group, you may have time, you may be able to negotiate the ransom down. Sometimes we're stalling to figure out how bad is it. So while the forensic investigators are in your systems, figuring out how did the threat actor get in, where did they move, because by law, if a threat actor accesses information, even if they don't take it from your systems, that's a data breach. So this is why you want outside counsel, because they're going to help you through that data breach notification, where you're notifying consumers that a threat actor might have had information, might have had access to their information. You also don't want to turn off the machine and throw it against the wall. That doesn't make anything go away. And actually shutting off the machine sometimes erases the rabbit trail that we need to do the forensic investigation. So what you want to do, though, is remove it from the server. So you want to disconnect it from the VPN, disconnect it from the actual servers, but keep it running.
So just actually unplug that Cat5 cable out of the back.
Exactly, but keep it powered on. Don't hit Control-Alt-Delete. Don't think that all of a sudden you're an IT professional, because they do leave kill switches sometimes so that we can't figure out what they're doing. I mentioned this earlier, to pay or not to pay. One thing that we always do and cyber insurance carriers require is an OFAC check to make sure that you're not paying a sanctioned entity. Now, I mentioned earlier, they're all from Russia, China, and North Korea, but they make sure to keep their servers in places that are not sanctioned by the United States. And this happened, the company, the ransomware group that hit Colonial Pipeline 4 years ago now, there was some rumor that they had their servers in North Korea, which would have meant that no US company could ever pay the ransom. They were so freaked out by this that they tweeted that it was just a rumor, and their servers are not in North Korea and they're not a sanctioned entity, so we can continue to pay them. And I mentioned, some honor among thieves. The other thing that these ransomware groups, and these are all computer science, STEM educated people that are doing this work. This is not someone in their mom's basement. These are cohesive business units. It is a business. If I had a case where we paid the ransom and the decryptor key didn't work, I'm going to get on the phone immediately with everybody else who does the kind of work I do, as well as law enforcement, and say, XYZ ransomware group, the decryptor doesn't work, don't pay them. And every other company that's been hit by them will go pencils down and say, we're not negotiating anymore. So they know that their decryptors need to work, or they'll go out of business in a week. Everybody's starting to look really terrified. So this is very technical, and it's the life cycle of a typical attack. I'm not going to go through it all. The highlight is it's usually 2 different groups. So there's a break-in crew, and then there's the crew that deploys the ransomware. So the break-in crew is a very large net. Please don't ever take it personally if you get hit with any sort of business email compromise or ransomware. They are sending out 100,000 emails with the hopes that one person clicks on the link, one person opens that attachment. So one company will do that. One threat actor will do that, and once they get a foothold in your company, they are looking through your financials. They are looking to see if you have cyber insurance. They are reading that policy. They're figuring out about your company once they're in your system, so they're actually learning from the inside out. We've had threat actors tell us, because we'll say we can't afford $5 million for a ransom demand. They'll say, well, they have a $10 million cyber insurance policy, so we know you're lying to us, because they've read the cyber insurance policy because they've been in the systems. Once they get a foothold, they will go on the dark web and say, we have a foothold in this company. and we'll sell it to you for $50,000 and you can deploy ransomware and you'll probably get $1 million. This is especially true during M&A transactions. So anytime you're going to do any sort of divestiture or acquisition, you want to make sure that you pay for a cybersecurity audit of the target company before you integrate them into your systems, because I've worked many cases where companies have literally bought ransomware. In the first part, the threat actor will get into a small company and they'll start reading emails and go, oh, this company is about to be bought by a much bigger company. So they'll keep that foothold, they'll go on the dark web, and there will be chatter about there's going to be an acquisition in the next 30 to 60 days, so just kind of hold still and then deploy it once they integrate the systems, and now you'll get a $50 million ransom. So, doing some vulnerability scanning, some penetration testing, and also some dark web monitoring. If you think you're going to be acquired, or if you're in the M&A business, you should do that on the target companies. It's really like, you can spend $10,000 to $15,000 on proactive cybersecurity to keep from having a $5 to $10 million hit post-acquisition.
So are they mining the data in the servers to understand
what's
the value? What's the value of this information if I were to try to sell it?
Yep.
Wow.
They're looking at attachment to emails.
Unbelievable.
We've had one threat actor actually tweet out, and we had to put a stop to it. We basically told the mothership of that ransomware group, but he was tweeting out, we have a foothold in this healthcare company. They're telling us that they can't pay the ransom, but here is a screenshot of what their executives make, and it was the CEO and the CFO and the risk manager and all of their salaries and bonuses for the past year, and it exceeded what the ransom demand was. The threat actors will start reaching out to employees if there's no negotiation, saying, we have all of your information, we have your kids' social security numbers. Clearly, your employer doesn't care about you. Mm-hmm. They won't negotiate with us, so they are getting nastier.
Gosh, it's scary. So ransomware obviously gets a lot of headlines, a lot of companies impacted by ransomware, but what we see across the industry is business email compromise is the tactic used most often by fraudsters to be able to obtain funds or redirect funds. Almost $2.7 billion of losses reported through ic3.gov in 2024, and business email, and 63% of the companies responded to the survey indicated that their company had been a victim of business email compromise. For individuals, it can be termed a little differently. It may be called email account compromise as opposed to business email compromise. So it has an impact on not only businesses, but can also have an impact on high net worth company or high net worth individuals and family practice companies that are managing high net worth. So there's three typical methodologies in business email compromise. The first is executive impersonation. This is a tactic the fraudster uses where they will impersonate an executive of the company and request that a payment be made or a change to an existing payment be made. The second one is vendor impersonation, where I think Brian mentioned where the fraudster will typically act like a vendor, and I think Heather, you said we talked about nesting, kind of where the fraudster may actually penetrate the vendor's network and nest themselves in that vendor's email, and then just the right time when it makes perfect sense, they'll insert themselves into the conversation so that the communication looks like it's coming from the vendor because it's literally the vendor's email. And then the third one hits really close to home, and that's employee impersonation. And this typically impacts direct deposit of payroll. So the fraudster, through potentially one of the free email services, will create an email address that looks just like mine. They'll send an email to the payroll department and will request a change in the direct deposit of payroll information. So I've changed my banking relationship. Please send my next payroll to this routing and transit and account number. And so, of course, when Friday rolls around, the payment goes to the account controlled by the fraudster and not to the legitimate employee. So he calls and says, hey, I didn't get paid today, what happened? And their response is, well, we did exactly what you told us to do, and we have email backup to prove it. And the employee said, that wasn't me, I didn't do that. And so now, obviously, the company is out that payroll and has to make up that information, and the funds then went to the account controlled by the fraudster. And I want to make sure to emphasize this. As a financial institution, we're going to do everything we possibly can to recover the funds that you have at risk as a result of fraud and as a result of business email compromise. But we're not always successful. As a matter of fact, in that AFP survey, 66% of the companies indicated that they were able to recover less than half of the money at risk. So when you think about how do I prevent this and what can I do, we're going to provide you with some pretty simple options and controls to put in place to help prevent business email compromise. And Heather, this happens in a number of different ways, right? I mean, you mentioned some of this. Phishing is obviously number one, email spoofing, the lookalike domains and this nesting thing. What about social engineering? How does that impact, or how does a fraudster leverage social engineering to be able to try to penetrate the defenses or our defenses?
So they'll, you get an email that looks like it's coming from, IT or Microsoft, and it's time to change your password. By logging in, you're actually logging in and entering your current credentials to give to the threat actor to then, use that to send emails on your behalf. We're also seeing Teams. So I've had 2 cases in the past couple of months where it's through Teams messages. If I get a Teams message, I assume it's from internal, because no external people should have access to our Teams. So the threat actor has infiltrated Teams, and you get a Teams message saying, hey, it's IT, we're seeing issues with your computer, click here so I can have access. I mean, I give access to my IT people all the time to my computer, usually because I call them to do it. But once they get access, then they're downloading information, they're deploying malware. So, this is just another new tactic that they're using to get into your systems. Also, I mean, obviously, anything that you click on your phones, anything that you click on your email, like we talked about before, opening attachments, even from, I don't open attachments even from trusted individuals or trusted clients. If I'm going to send an attachment to a client, I will say, in my next email, there's going to be an attachment with this report. That's from me. Because, you're back and forth and you open it really quickly and you don't know that it's sent out, and it's sent out malware.
I always want to caution, be cautious about what you post on social media. It's just really important. The fraudsters are leveraging these platforms to troll for victims. They're looking at these social media platforms to try to determine where do you work, what are your job responsibilities, do you have issues that might make you more vulnerable? And they're looking at all that information. So as public service announcement, just be careful what you're posting and share that information with both your younger family members and your older family members, because they're going to be likely targets for this social engineering. So I'm always asked, Heather, and I know you get this too, what keeps you up at night, and kind of looking at things like what's happening, and we call this looking around the corner. And this trusted partner and imposter scam that we see now throughout the industry is just really horrific. I mean, the fraudsters are pretending to be people that you would typically trust, your attorney, your bank, your investment advisor, I mean, even your doctor, to try to get information. So are you seeing that?
Oh yeah, so AI, and I think we get into deep fake here,
Yeah.
but AI is probably what scares me. It's very exciting. Anytime there's new technology, people love to use it without taking the necessary precautions. So ChatGPT is a wonderful thing until you put sensitive information into it. I had a client tell me that he was using ChatGPT to write his annual report, and I said, the external annual report or the internal annual report? Because if you're putting information in that's meant for the internal annual report, you've just basically posted it on the World Wide Web, because that's what you're doing. It's learning from all the information you're putting in. And again, we love that it'll write a story for you, or it's very good for like marketing and communications, but it's terrible if you're entering any sort of proprietary or personal or sensitive information into it. And we talk about deep fakes, which I think we're getting to. It only takes about 3 or 4 seconds of your voice for someone to completely mimic your voice and sound just like you. So if you have a voicemail, outgoing voicemail message on your phone, that's all it's going to take for a threat actor to then copy that and then create a voice for you.
And some of the examples that I've seen, the ways that the demos of the ways that can be done is just incredible, how lifelike and how realistic. One of the things that I have heard is that if you were to test a video, what may be a deepfake video, is ask the person to move their hand in front of their face like that, because it creates some friction that you might not, in a deepfake, it creates some friction that you might not have seen otherwise.
Yeah, deepfake hands are still weird.
Yeah.
So, and you can see it. Like if you watch deepfake videos, the hands are still super weird. It's kind of like early Pixar stuff where they couldn't really do humans on the cartoons and the movies. That's still how deepfake is. But the voices are fantastic.
Yeah. And so one of the keys, though, is that as fraud changes and as these attack vectors change, our protection methodologies and measures have to change too. We have to be nimble in the way that we think about how do we go about protecting ourselves as these attacks are changing. So we talked. Do you have more you want to cover?
Yeah, I will say with deepfakes. I'll give one example. I had a CFO of a company. She was traveling overseas. The threat actors will smish your phone number. So her phone number with her voice called her assistant and said, "I've been in a car accident. They're taking me to the hospital. They don't take American insurance." So the threat actor had also been trailing her because she was checking in everywhere on social media, which you should never do, to know that she was overseas, and said, I need $10,000 deposit or they're not going to see me. I'm badly injured. I think my leg is broken. Like I said, they don't take American insurance. The assistant wired $10,000 of her own money to help her boss. Really quickly, you can stop this in its tracks by saying, "I will call you back," and hang up. And there's always something emergent. It is always a panic. You've all heard the stories of like a grandchild calling the grandparent saying they're in jail. So there's something emergent. "My phone's dying, please don't hang up." If you call the real number back, you'll get the real person. The other thing is, like anybody who has kids, you had a safe word or a code word for someone to pick them up at school. You should have code words with all of your administrative staff. If I am calling you for information or money, ask me for the secret code word. Do it with your elderly parents. Do it with your college kids. We have, my mother-in-law is 92 years old, and we told her we needed to, and she lives independently. She's all with it, and we asked her, we need a family code word, so if anyone calls and asks you for money, and she wanted hers to be gullible, because she's like, I'm not gullible, so it needs to be gullible. But it really, that's the two-factor authentication you need to have for deep fakes, is have a secret code word with anybody that would be asking you for money or information. I need your credit card number. That's what's happening right now with kids going off to college. Hey, I'm in a bind. They won't let me in my class. I'm locked out. I need your credit card number. And it is your kid's voice, and it is their phone number.
And I can promise you, law enforcement is not going to ask you to purchase gift cards to pay bail. That doesn't happen. So these are some questions that we always consider that you would want to think about as you're preparing your plan, as you're thinking through our protection, your protection methodologies. And these are 3 industry suggested practices that we always want to bring to play and make sure that we're explaining. Number 1 is that you want to guard your house. You want to work with your IT department, your IT service provider, to make sure that your systems are patched regularly, that you're up to date. I can promise you, if you receive a request to update the operating system of your phone or your device, your iPad, your tablet, or your phone, make sure that you're applying that, because there's a reason why that provider is asking you to create that update. It's not always for feature and functionality. It can be because there's a bug that they have discovered in that system and they want to try to fix it. You want to make sure that you're using it, as Heather mentioned, multi-factor authentication and dual control, the things that will help you to put a second set of eyes on a transaction or to help prevent some of these situations from occurring. The second thing you want to do is create an employee training program or associate training program, and also share this with your family members. But make sure that you're talking about creating this fraud awareness mindset. It's about thinking through these things before you act and before you take any steps. At Regions, we provide you with a number of different resources. We have 3 different publicly available websites that you can go to. We have a YouTube channel that you can go to and actually download videos that will help you as far as communicating that fraud awareness mindset and protections that your employees would need to invoke. And then thirdly is creating a fraud and risk governance plan. It's making sure that you know what you're going to do when you become a victim. Who are you going to call? What kind of steps are they going to take? What things are they going to do to help me recover? You've got to make sure that you do things like dividing financial responsibilities, putting in place things like least privilege access, where you're only giving employees access to the sections of your network that they need to be able to do their job, so that they don't have access to things that are that they don't need. And then preparing yourself and creating controls on your side of the payment transaction to make sure that you are doing the things that you need to do to protect yourself. We talked a little bit about cybersecurity insurance coverage, and I'm always an advocate of that. I think it's something that we need to consider. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, and cyber insurance, like I said, they want to see that you've got controls in place. And a lot of that is what Jeff just talked about. So employee training, phishing exercises, real world phishing exercises. What the threat actors are using, making sure you've got good backups and good managed detection and response systems. A lot of software needs to be on the system, but cyber insurance does pay. It'll pay the ransom, it pays outside counsel, it pays the forensic investigation. It also pays for what's called bricking. So sometimes a threat actor will get in the system and it will affect it so badly with the malware that it turns the computers into bricks, like they just don't work anymore. So imagine if your company had to replace every single laptop or desktop computer. This actually happened to a pharmaceutical company, and all of the pharmaceutical salespeople around the world, all their phones just died. So just that cost alone. So yeah, cyber insurance does pay for a lot, but it does require you to show them that you've got controls in place before you get it.
Well, the human element is still an important factor. And so this is actually the most important slide that I'll show to you today. This is a callback control that we suggest that clients use to help prevent some of these situations from occurring. If you receive a request to make a payment or make a change to an existing payment, stop your process, pick up the phone, and call the requester at a number that you know. Don't call the number in the email or text message. Don't respond to the email or text message, but call them at a number that you know and confirm that that request is legitimate. I promise you, it's a 5-minute phone call, and it's a whole lot easier to explain why I'm calling to verify that request than it is to go back and explain a $500,000 loss. So it's well worth your while to employ stop, call, and confirm. If you don't have this kind of control in your organization today, please go back and talk to whoever you need to talk to try to get this in place.
And the thing to know about wire fraud is you don't know it happened right away. You usually don't know it happened until the person you were supposed to pay calls you 30 or 45 days later and says you never paid me. And by that time, the money is long, long gone.
Yeah. So these are some resources. They're federal government websites. Most of these entities have social media sites that you can follow also to get more real-time information. And then, of course, the 3 region sites that we have that I mentioned earlier. So as I mentioned, as we opened, you can text questions to Regions to 22333, and we're happy to try to take some of those if we've got any. Dana, do we have questions? Okay. There are AI assistant apps that will answer incoming calls to your business, take messages, and provide company information. How vulnerable are these apps? Do you know?
That's a very broad question. So any time that you're introducing software into your company system, it should have all the same controls as you have in your company. So if it's free, it's probably not great, right? So you want to make sure that it's got two-factor authentication on it. You want to ask the organization that's trying to sell you the app or sell you the software, do they have cyber insurance? Does it cover third-party losses? That you want to know what their cyber controls are in place. So, without knowing the company and again, there's now thousands of them popping up. You just always want to do your due diligence to make sure that they're protecting the information the same way that your company is.
This question is, I'm using Regions' online pay system. I'm assuming that's the bill pay platform for consumer. Some companies do not accept electronic payments, so Regions issues checks. What are you doing to protect? I'm assuming that's to protect the checks. There's a limited number of characters that are allowed in that. So, there are a number of different ways that we look to try to provide protection in those environments. I can't really go into a lot of detail around what happens behind the curtain, but suffice it to say, we still encourage you to use those bill payment platforms. Several procedures require a voice call to the client to confirm a distribution. Are there cases where AI clones someone's voice, and are there forthcoming? I'm not sure about that.
So
AI
AI clones for sure. The deep fakes are used for that. It's harder to then do dual factor authentication. So I always do, for my dual factor authentication, I never do a call. I always do a text message. So I'm sitting there holding my phone. Unless the threat actor has my phone, they can't get the number for that dual factor authentication. So I rarely do voice, but yeah, I mean, that is happening with the deep fakes.
So I don't want to leave out folks in the room. Any questions here in the room? None? Gosh, we did a great job. Scared you to death for sure. Well, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Heather, again, it's an honor to be with you and to share the stage with you. As I mentioned in the opening, fraud's not going away, and it requires us to be even more conscientious, to be considerate of what protection measures we have in place, and it requires more vigilance than ever before, and creating that fraud awareness mindset.
Jeff, there was a question that popped up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Yeah. I think it was, if you don't pay the ransom, do the fraudsters follow through on publishing the information? Absolutely. Oh yeah. Oh, they will. And they'll go public, not just on the deep and dark web. Like, they'll tweet about it, or sometimes they'll call law enforcement, or they'll call the authorities. So if it's a healthcare organization, they'll call Health and Human Services because there's been a HIPAA issue. With the new SEC rule that publicly traded companies have to report a cyber attack, threat actors will threaten to call the SEC and let them know that you've had a cyber attack. So, they will for sure. That's why you hear about some of them.
Yeah. So Dana wanted me to mention, if you are here and interested in continuing education credits, you want to see Dana Williams in the back, and she can provide you with what information you need for that continuing education credit. She's waving her hand back there on the back my left, back behind you. So thank you again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the opportunity. For those of you that joined us online, thank you so much. It's an important conversation. It's one that we believe at Regions to be something that's extremely important. We value our education and awareness programs. We value financial education, and we want to make sure that fraud education is an integral part of what we want to provide from a financial education standpoint. So I'll turn it over, Leslie, to you to close us out.
Okay. Well, Heather and Jeff, thank you so much. I think it was a very interesting discussion. There's many takeaways that I have, and learned some new things in addition to all the training that we undergo all the time here. I think one of the big ones is having that passcode for family members and friends. I do think, just one thing before we close is, how many of you have gotten the toll texts? And there's just so many things and ways people are trying to initiate fraud these days. And I think one of the biggest risks we have is around complacency, because you kind of get immune to it and you think it's all around us. Any tips or thoughts around that?
Yeah, so if you don't know who's texting you, don't ever respond. Obviously, don't click on anything. The toll road authority is not going to text you. They're going to mail. The police are not going to text you. They're going to show up at your door. They're not going to call you either. They're going to show up at your door, and that's all. I'm an attorney by training. A lot of that is it's legal process. If they just call you, they can't. There's no trail there. The other thing is, please stop scanning on QR codes in public. It's a horrible way for. A horrible and easy way for threat actors to get in your system. If it is a menu at a restaurant, that is different. It makes me angry. I want a paper menu, but that is probably safe. But if you see QR codes just kind of out in the wild, especially if it's advertising something, don't click on the QR code. It immediately will upload malware.
And I think, Jeff, you said it earlier, we talk all the time here at Regions about being fraud aware. And just, I think, staying on our toes and not getting complacent to it and just making it top of mind is really important. We will share the presentation with you after the session today. We hope that you'll share this with your colleagues, friends, family members too. We hope that this is educational and helps save someone from some of these headaches going forward. And as Jeff said, we take your security very seriously. We want to help protect you as much as we can because we value your relationship with us tremendously. Jeff also mentioned the resources externally and both internally. If you go to regions.com and look for fraud, there are a number of resources for you to take advantage of as well. And our team will be around after this morning's session to answer questions and just have more discussion around this important topic. Thank you all again for joining us. We had several hundred people online, I think, as well. So we hope it's been beneficial to you and know how much we value and appreciate your relationship with us at Regions. So thank you all very much.